Mmusi Maimane, parliamentary leader of the DA, says the ANC is responsible for anti-growth legislation that will harm South Africa's economy and result in fewer new jobs being created and possibly more jobs being lost.
We're not in a place today where we have the comfort of being able to legislate without keeping jobs at the top of our minds. We certainly face a crisis, and we've sworn duty to be able to deal with the crisis that we face. Parliament must acknowledge the severe economic problems facing South Africa. The fact that job-killing bills were passed by the previous fourth Parliament is outrageous and only shows that the majority party in the fourth Parliament was indeed out of touch with the needs of South Africa. So to make this fifth Parliament truly a jobs Parliament, the first order of business certainly must be to review and amend job-killing bills that were passed during the previous term. It's astonishing that these bills were passed through by the government party at a time when unemployment was only on the rise. Is the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Amendment Bill. In its current form, the bill fosters no market confidence in South Africa's oil and gas mining future. The bill contains more than 30 instances where the rules will be decided by regulation rather than legislation. And these regulations will be decided by the Minister of Mineral Resources. This means that the minerals can be changed rapidly and at the whim of any minister. This provides no predictability and no certainty for investors. It also leaves the door wide open to open up the potential corrupt activities. This bill was bulldozed through the National Council of Provinces and was passed through the NCOP in a mere 12 days, which I think is indeed irregular. Another highly problematic job-killing bill is obviously the Private Security Industry Regulation Amendment. This bill contains amendments that will allow the Minister of Police's discretion to expropriate more than 51% of private security companies if owned by foreign nationals. Imposing restrictions on the ownerships of security companies will discourage investment in this sector and other sectors. This jeopardizes jobs in the industries and will weaken the private security industry, currently doing much of the work of our weak police service. Essentially, this bill not only risks the safety and security of millions of South Africans, but also their livelihoods.
Well, regarding the press conference that the Democratic Alliance parliamentary leader Mmusi Maimane held regarding what he said was job-killing legislation, it is necessary to point out that per se the legislation is not job-killing. It really depends on the broader economic context. There were three laws which he identified. The one was the Labour Relations Amendment Bill, and in particular the clause relating to the creation of an employment services agency or employment recruitment agency by government. This is solely to place people in jobs. It wasn't meant to, and it's not defined as a job creating agency. It's just to match job seekers with jobs. It is something that the private sector has been doing, but this state-run agency is not going to replace the private sector. In a way, it's meant to fill the gap left by labour broking to some extent. The second piece of legislation is the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Amendment Act. What the DA is objecting to is a clause which would allow an automatic minimum of 20% of free carried interest in all mining, exploration and production rights to go to the state with a maximum of 100%. Now, that might deter investors, as the DA is saying, but many countries in the world have similar regimes, and it really depends on the state of the sector, the profitability. You can make money and be profitable and create jobs with such a provision in place, so it's not a sine qua non that this provision will lead to job losses. It's much more complex than that. The third piece of legislation is the Private Security Industry Regulation Amendment Bill, which will make it obligatory for all private security companies to be 51% owned by South African companies. Here again, There's been a lot of protest by foreign-owned companies, warning and lots of warnings about the withdrawal of investment. Again, if the South Africa's economy is thriving, if there's lots of money flowing in the economy, these kind of measures can be lived with. I'm not saying I approve of it as a measure, but in and of itself, it's not necessarily job creating. So I think one has to have a bit of a nuanced approach. It's not so clearly black and white as the DA is suggesting.